Recording. So welcome everyone to today's event with the Dante Alighieri Society of BC in Vancouver. My name is Arianna Dagnino and I am the Cultural Events Coordinator. Here with us we have today Sara Fruner, Italian poet who lives in New York, and she will tell us about the lights and the shadows, let's say, of her life in Manhattan. With us, we have Renato Zane, our president, and Stefano Gulmanelli, our vice president, Federica Ferruda, our treasurer. So without further ado, let's ask Sara to step up and take the mic and tell us about her poetic journey throughout Manhattan.
Yes. First of all, I have to thank you, Arianna, and to thank the Dante Alighieri Society of British Columbia for inviting me. I accepted the invitation enthusiastically because for many reasons, let's say. The first is that I share a special bond with Canada, actually. And by telling you this, you learn something about my path, okay? Studies as a literary translator. Right after my two master's degree and Master of Philosophy in Translation Studies, I started translating books. And the first job that I landed was to translate Dion Brand. And Dion Brand is one of the most eminent writers and poets and thinkers that you have in Canada. So I translated her two novels of hers. She wrote more poetry of hers. And also I came to the Banff Center for the Arts in Alberta as a translator in residence. And then I was in Toronto as a panelist during a conference on Brand's work. And there I met, truly amazing scholars, people in general, and fellow translators. So for me, it's really a pleasure, to be here in Canada with you. I feel I am in Vancouver, actually. So my heart really leapt up when Arianna reached out to me, and I accepted with joy. So let me go back 1 second to my experience as a translator, which is like vital for me. I really owe a lot to translation. I consider translation a true art form. So the experience with Dion Brand shaped me as a translator, but also as a writer and as a poet. I also am a fiction writer, so I am a novelist as well. So maybe you guys want to know. So I learned to dig in later does on a daily basis, basically, we disassemble and reassemble our own language constantly. It is, however, like a misconception or a common belief to consider the source language as the language we need to master to translate properly. And that's a major misinterpretation. The knowledge of the target language is just as relevant as the knowledge of the source language. So I am telling you this because digging into words is basically what poets do every day when they work on their own, poetry. So poetry for me has much to do with speleology, as I say. A poem plunges downward to progress forward. So by translating, I found out how muscular a line can get through a poignant use of a verb, or through the use of suspension or repetition, and how, for instance, delivering levity or music, where music needs to be created, is extremely difficult to achieve. So challenges while translating have cracked me open, I would say, but they pieced me together anew in a way. So this is the start. So how I started out as a translator, and I am still a translator, and I'm proud to be, actually. So, but you know, after years in Italy, and I call them like my Sturm und Drang years, so spent in looking for what was missing, I eventually made it to New York in 2016, at the end of 2016. And I moved to Sugar Hill, Harlem, after longing for this city for almost 10 years. I really wanted to leave the city for a certain amount of time, which, by the way, is still unknown to me. So I'm here now, but, you know, I don't know exactly how long. And, you know, it's good to experience this uncertainty, I think. And now, if you'll allow me, I will like share my my screen and a PowerPoint so that you have an idea. Let me see if you, so you can see it, right? Yes. Benissimo. Let me,
full screen.
yes, full screen. Is it on full screen? Not yet. Yes,
Not yet.
now.
Yes, like this
So
is okay.
is it now? Yes, good. Benissimo. So as I said, end of 2016, and 2016 was a peculiar year, and November especially was a peculiar month, because I arrived here a week before the elections, those elections, and those elections were followed in this city by a very dismal suspended time during which the city was full on shell shocked, I promise, completely at a loss for words. And it was really a frightening moment because, you know, we didn't really see it coming, you know. So, yeah, it was a week, yes, a week before that. And I will never forget the eerie kind of some time to read into it. But then I got it. The city was instantly responding to that historic event and mourning right away the death of an era. And then after a few days, the city pulled itself together and poured angry New Yorkers. Let me see if I can, let me see if I can go on. I think I need to, sorry about this. Let me go back to this. I'm sorry, I need to have this on the side, otherwise I cannot navigate it. So yes, as I was saying, the city pulled itself together and poured angry New Yorkers in the streets, you know, so I experienced this, and you can see it by the crowds. So the elation of being finally where I wanted to be was marred by the unpleasant feeling that the entire world, and not just the US actually, had halted and stepped back into some sort of, you know, new Middle Ages regarding major long-standing issues like race disparities, violence on women, immigration, and a wave of conservatism and isolationism was building up all over the world, very strong and very wide. I mean, Italy, France, Brazil, Great Britain with Brexit. So the title of the collection that I'm going to speak about, Bitter Bites from Sugar Hills, is partly autobiographical and partly metaphorical. I was truly living in Sugar Hill, which is a 10-block long neighborhood in West Harlem between 145th Street and 155th Street. And that tasted very sweet, I can tell you. And by the way, a little bit of history. Sugar Hill got its name in the 1920s when the neighborhood became a popular place for wealthy African Americans. And so to live during the Harlem Renaissance. And so people like, for instance, Duke Ellington and W.E.B. Du Bois used to live in Sugar Hill. And nowadays, the neighborhood, the population is very diverse, like mostly African Americans and Latin Americans. So, to have you an idea of the neighborhood. So Hills of Sugar. So it was sweet, yet my mouth was awash also with bitterness by what we were experiencing on a global level and in the US particularly. And that conflicting taste came to inform my poetry as well. A little bit of a digression here. Sometimes I sense a misconception about poetry, since its form is refined and elevated, or simply other than fiction or the everyday language, poetry is wrongly considered like ethereal or light years away from the everyday, which is actually the very opposite. Poetry is covered with dirt for me. It comes from the earth, from our dirty world, I would say. And mine makes no difference. So my verses could not stay away from the miseries that were around me and that I saw around me. So those collectively relevant issues that I mentioned before, like immigration, violence on women, racism, leaked into my page. And my page turned political in this. And you can notice this in a couple of poems that I'm going to read to you. And the first one is titled A Spring Now, and it opens the book. And you will see that the immigration vocabulary and the bureaucracy around immigration actually affect even seasons. So that's Spring Now. Wearing pink air as a balaclava, and first concocting, then humming, a crispy war cry. It is sabotaging winter, heading to outshine. Criminal and terrorist, the only legitimate green card holder, has entered the country, smuggling in a cargo of color and wonder. And on this same track, I will read Amnesia. My body swimming, belly blinking at the seafloor, back flirting with the sky above. In a matter of seconds, a peak-shaped shade groped the girly light. Just a cloud passing by, I thought jovially, or some prehistoric bird making fun of the sun. Back on the beach, my moves stopped, my mouth dropped, the feeling of skin getting snagged amid itch and stretch. No matter the amnesia you can buy for cheap, you never get away from the day you live. And another one is blank is the color of lost memory. So I landed in the US in the moment where the cancel culture was starting to stir in a very, massive way. So this is a poem about the risks of hiding or erasing our cumbersome historical pasts. Blank is the color of lost memory. History reeks and throbs. Its skin is covered in sores and boils, since when the ape men killed bunnies and bucks to shut up his growling guts. A demolition bowl to level uneven grounds and clear out thorny yards is called Soweto. The fabrication of a space to lodge uneasy waste, turning unwelcome subjects into welcome outcasts, be they of flesh or iron, marble or cotto, is called a ghetto. Blank is the color of lost memory. Only by having troubles and unease, plague and disease, shining red and rot on your daily track, there is a chance for your face to use a grimace, for a question mark to fire the mirth of single thought. So this is kind of my political poetry, I would say, but of course it's not all this. The relocation here provided me with a cityscape that has welcomed, with all its harsh contradictions, my poetic self. So I started cruising the streets, searching people's eyes and bodies that the city narrates every day, every night. New York, as I say, is a storyteller that nobody can really silence. It is an extraordinary repository of diverse humanity. But I'd soon find out it was not all sunshine and rainbows. It was not. And another small digression here. In Italy, we grow up with a certain idea of America, and especially New York. We gobble down movies and TV shows about New York that present us with this sort of iconography, right? This and this. And here we have some movies. So Once Upon a Time in America. And here we have views with the water towers and Times Square, right? Or these amazing sunsets that the city presents us with. Or this is, by the way, Fifth Avenue during the pandemic. So nobody was around and it was pretty spooky, I would say, it was deserted. Or Columbus Circle. So this is the idea, the iconography that we have. I also grew up devouring books and arts about New York. So for instance, my dear friend Alden Caulfield of The Catcher in the Rye and his dilemma, where would the ducks of Central Park go when the Southern Lake freezes all over? So this is one of my, let's say, first books about New York that I read. Okay, or to mention a classic of poetry, Whitman, the forever faces and the interminable eyes that Whitman asks for in Give Me the Splendid Silent Sun, which is an enthusiastic ode to New York City. So I grew up with all this, but I also grew up with art about New York, so opera, for instance. You see this, you see a picture and then you see it live, right? Like this. And this is actually a restaurant right around like behind my corner, actually. So the cinematographic, the literary, and the artistic representation that we get of the city stands out so vividly and is so overwhelmingly influential on constructing our own individual imagery that when we arrive here for the first time, we have the feeling we know the place. And maybe that's also part of the reason why the fish out of water of the world that swim to the city feel immediately at home in its waters. They have experienced them in their imagination afore. And if you think of it, the idea of a thing is the first house of that very thing. So, but I said before, no sunshine and rainbows, right? I was faced with the opposite. I discovered beauty in the city could sparkle with horror and also trauma and disgust. This contrast caught me by surprise and opened up new emotional territories that my mind itched to explore. We are used to a different kind of what I'm saying. It comprises the landscape, the artistic heritage, the way people walk and talk and gesture. I personally come from Trentino. I haven't mentioned it yet. Trentino is a region in the north, in the very north, which is a fairy tale-like region, immersed in green and cleanliness and silence. So totally different scenario from the city. In New York, I've learned, and it was a major discovery for me, I've learned that different aesthetics were possible. The aesthetics of ugliness was possible, and particularly the aesthetics of the struggle, as New York is a hungry creature of a city that demands a lot from you in terms of energy, balance, grit, poise, mercy, you name it. So to quote David Bowie, there is a sense of urgency in this town, and it was absolutely right. Urgency means need. New York attracts those who feel something is missing. Something is missing in their life. It is the city, I would say, where unfulfilled desire is king and unquenchable thirst queen. And at one point in your life, or maybe more than at one point, as far as I am concerned, you feel that way. You feel consumed by longing. And New York then becomes your Mecca and welcomes you as a wandering pilgrim. So for the restless souls consumed by longing and at pains finding their own place, New York immediately appears as an easy dispenser of longing. I mentioned Whitman before. I think there was in me some sort of Whitmanesque elan towards the city, an attraction at first towards the hustle and bustle, the skylines, the cinephile vibes, which are there and are, oh my God, and fun, but they are soon eclipsed and replaced but by something more interesting, far more interesting and deep. An attraction that quickly veered from the conventional towards the small and the unnoticed, the wretched, the invisible, the discarded, the lost. So I detected a shift in the way I perceived the city. I started looking horizontally rather than vertically. I began to care for pavements more than skyscrapers. And you can see it here, it's just to give you, these pictures are to give you a sense of this process of shifting. So the discarded, the small, the tiny, started to inform my writing and really to trigger my curiosity, you know? So in this collection, I did not really mean to commend the city of dreams. I was given in what was, let's say, chanting the patent gorgeousness of breathtaking views. What is already there and visible can be left to fiction, as far as I am concerned, or to tourists or travel guides for that matter. The tiniest and the disproportionate, the doleful and the down and out, the broken, the beaten and the bruised, all these and many others are the beloved subjects of my quest as a poet here. So I tried to capture how imperfect and flawed and even nightmarish the city can get, how uneven its skin is, its flesh raw. And mind you, I came out of a place of love because I deeply love New York City, but I tried to be in a way objective. I believe a poet's duty is to present the reader with views of reality that include unexpected side paths leading out of the expected picture, bringing them to somewhere or somewheres they would not ever envisage to get to. So contradictoriness is crucial in this collection. And that is true also for spaces in New York that you love and hate at the same time. And the subway is one of them. Anthropology in the making is what I usually name New York City subway. You spend, or I spend, a lot of time there. And in the space of a ride, you can find yourself very far away from the carriage you sit or stand, simply by looking at somebody's, face or feet. And here I collected some pictures for you, and that they might give you like a taste of what I mean by this, okay? So to me, this kind of picture kind of reminds me of movies, like the film of the movie, right? So you can find really every sort of, people, details. I love the way she looks at him here. So sad. I like what she does with her feet, reading, when you are so immersed in your reading. Oh, sorry. I think I just went too far away here from my, sorry about this. Here, yes, sorry, here. Here, this, I love this picture. Okay, so you have basically an idea what I'm speaking about, you know, about the subway. And I'm reading a couple of poems that are about the subway. So one is titled Subway Semantics. The leak of beer, the lake it feeds, the feet close by, the face beside. In rush hours, arms and legs flood with elegies, stairways and trains, having no ideas of all the pages they are leaving behind in the bustling cloud. The lingos on air, the careless looks, the horny hand, the broken film. Subway semantics overturns aesthetics, sounding like music, but chanting no ethics. And another one, let me find it. Yeah. Sleeping Beauty. The opulent breath of decadent meals saturates gaps among edgy silences over working lunches. Someone in the subway has spilled milk on the platform edge. The universe might think to stop and collect its dropped lot, its lost path. You can walk by, bury your eyes in your little smart pit, devote yourself to God the unnoticed, playing online chess, or Mr. Success, wearing headphones, looking business. When one day you look up and find the city staring at your shameless dozing, your senses numb with too much no, stars gone forever on a morning floor, you will pray for some remedy, some new stink to please reek by, kiss you awake from the deathbed of your sleepy eye. So I personally find grace in a limping leg, in a tired look, on a sad face. And if you hunt for those things, you're spoiled for choice here. Any corner of the city I navigated, any passenger I stared at was a receptacle of a story or just a splinter of a story. Sometimes they inspired poems directly, but most of the time they simply created like a certain sentiment, an atmosphere that worked like a nebula for baby stars, a nursery where the poem would slowly or very quickly form and tumble out. When I speak about direct inspiration, I refer to poems like these two ones. One is called Nefertiti, and I really saw this woman, this beautiful woman in the Bronx. I was running, and you know, I knew that I had to write a poem about her. So when I got home, I wrote a poem about her. Nefertiti. The molecular structures get rearranged in the bodies of passersby and never-do-wells. When Nefertiti steps out of past glories, out of noble agonies, to head to Clay Avenue, the sun setting its warm hand on her silky nape like a tender friend. The unexpected, the syntax, arts and gods write their epics in the Inn of Heaven or the Pit of Belmont. Belmont is a part of the Bronx. And the other one is titled Apparent Catastrophe. And I was listening to a concert in a church and on 42nd Street. And a tiny old lady came in, and she was an homeless. And I was immediately struck by her. She was so tiny. And, you know, you will hear her presence here. A battalion of battered angels shuffle by, their bleeding wings, their burning brains. The black body of a beetle breaks the spell of a wide museum as it decides to cross its pin-knit platinum. A church grows gibbous, and the music falls when a woman's hunch enters the holy hall of nights in the cold she smells after all. Still, an arch of light flashes in your mouth when you bow your neck to a public tap. In the poems I'm going to read now to you, there was no specific and straight inspiration from a person or a place. The poems just shimmered into being in the New York City nebula. And I will just show you some pictures here. Let me find one. So these are subjects that kind of, you know, are in the city and get my attention when I pass by. And then for, you know, they are in my poetry way, I would say. So for instance, this lady here, this man standing there alone, or kids playing in Central Park, homeless people, you know, in front of a church. This is the Bronx. The Bronx. This is something that always attracts my attention, the geometries that the city can build. For me, this is the urban version of a Kandinsky. Or these sort of landscapes. This is again the Bronx. This, of course, is a little bit of iconic New York City. And this is Coney Island. I will read a poem about it. For me, it's a special place. And yeah, so I will read that poem to you later. So let me find.
Sorry if I interrupt you.
Yes.
Is there something, are you having in your mic that, because there is always a kind of a sound that really bothers your voice, unfortunately, when you.
No, I'm not using a direct mic, so it's the PC mic. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
I'm sorry
okay,
about this.
It's okay,
I will try to speak louder.
We can hear, but sometimes we lose some of the words, which is a pity.
See. Okay, I will try to speak louder also. That may help. Okay, good.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. The purple hibiscus. A purple hibiscus blooms on her cheekbone. No displaced tattoo, no messy foundation, but of consensus, a simple perversion. She's no child. She's tried dire straits. Her breast has fed one girl and one boy who've grown and left. Now she's alone with her man and his ghosts, with the Bible in her brains, a body of skin and bone, plus the rosary she shells. She thinks life is this: work and church, mop, then lunch, bodega for friends, laundry to get done, a traveling exhibition of rare archaeology, That is what she is. Colored strata of history written on her complexion. Or maybe a murderer killing her time with the knickknacks of her legacy as a woman and partner, waiting for the very end or the real beginning. And then the oppressed. Yes, absolutely oppressed. The oppressed. You think they enjoy going to the movies, getting wild at parties, cramming their woofers, their cars and attitude with rage and sexism, not to mention solitude. The world is one thing, hard as a distance between a nod and a no. But the truth is, the oppressed sink in the well of themselves. Sitting on this hill, my hopes dangling on the branch of disbelief, my eyes sore with too much watching, I spot history dumping the past and curling up right here and now, its filthy boot under a silky gown. And solo dancer. So New York City is also the city of solitude or loneliness. It depends on, on which perspective you are looking at it. Solo dancer. Graffiti gargoyles greet you guys in the cave of beauty, the den of decay. Molded carpets, failed quartets, bodega bags, carrying cargoes of personal mess. You are a solo dancer, shouts the madman on the KFC corner. You must dance solo in this city, in the world. Don't wait for the nod, for the green go-go. No one will save you. No plastic, no Botox, no shrink, no peel. Mind the madman, his rotten bill. I would say all that glitters is not gold. Bursting briefcases of cocaine brains, gun lungs pumping under heist-like coats before a stupid joke at a pharmacy clerk. Armpits reeking of bourgeois fear when the working class stares at the uptown ease. Sometimes it happens, you turn a clean hand, anticipating grace, and you're greeted by 5 smiles of dirt under overgrown nails. And then maybe something a bit more positive. City rules. The city has plans you would never figure, wits you will soon discover. It fools you around by dropping a psychic where a bar used to be, an event on a ring of skunk if it feels oddly eccentric. The city feasts on blood after killing a family diner for a big department store. It wrapped the scene in national tissue paper while choking the gore with silver caricature. Then, all of a sudden, when you've fallen from such heights that even clouds are afraid to tell, let alone sail, when your heart is a shipwreck and the world a remote coast, the city picks you up, straightens your rags, kisses salty tracks above your cheeks, and sends you back to your new old self by bursting just simply into a blue noon or a jazz thing. And let's see, sour and sweet. Sour is the taste of skies some days. You spot bribery in your parlor, Grease graffiti on the bus window your brimful head uses as a pillow. You hear melodies sinking in a trumpet case when a musician, a Motown miracle, trades his gift for a rent-controlled flat. You feel the rugged skin of bygone hopes reaching out to your clench when you make your way across chess players, Krishna preachers, voodoo kings, and faith healers. In one word, the offspring Union Square delivers from Sunday to Sunday on the bed of its stairway. When your love is too honest, the soup boiled over, and a syllable is not enough, you please read the poem a single head leaves behind while bopping to a jiggle or sophisticated mind. Sweet you will find the stem that you lick for the next letter you're going to send. And then, let's see, 55. The one and its opposite. What you see is wonder framed in tourists' gapes as much as locals' hunger caught in closing doors. Within a grin, a crack. Behind a step, a limp. I could dance till night loses its dark mood and sleeps whole into a golden coat. Trees grave for running in the skies so viscerally, they bud leaves, color sleep bruises, and jump on kites. And Lady Longing. This is one of the first poems actually that I wrote here, and I was so, actually, I didn't want to enter malls and stores, like because I was like afraid to miss something. Okay, so this actually is a poem about that. A lace of longing on a cake of steel is the gift you just landed. Get back, laying your hand on her neck. You tiptoe dance miles and miles from Grand Central to City Hall. You, unsatisfied lover, who do not dare to enter a mall for the fear of missing one sigh, one look from your mistress wiggling around you. Day by day, you track runs in her stockings, holes under armpits. Her morning breath can cook epics of rye and chili, cold air and sour chips. At midnight, you can get a gold piece pull as a goodnight kiss. Success can be too sweet and mine your smile. So you go and look for the clean mouth of the broken souls. And there you walk the carpet of splinters, lie down from South Ferry all the way up to Pelham Parkway. You can't collect every bit of shattered dreams, can't bring home the unspeakable face, the death of a look, the dismay on a pace. You walk side by side, your beauty and bully. The city is no liar. The city is no joker. She just does the favor to turn her eyes from the clock, pretending not to see the time she wastes playing around with her silly devotee. And the silly devotee, it's me, of course. And of course, the remedy, it's about Coney Island. To make a Coney Island drop its sad smile, I would set up a bonfire, collect paper petals, paint them with poetry, Dante, Neruda, Dylan, of course, sprinkle them down the skimpy fabric of its clown pens, and have dimples button its cheeks. To make your tears swim back to sea and have your chest be washed again with rays of light days of delight. I would bring your body, your pangs and distress, afford the restored cheer on Coney Island's shore. So in my journey as a poet, this is about New York, but I'm also drawn to certain, let's say, thematic regions where I like to dwell. Solitude, pain, wonder, love, but also like omens or feelings of something unspeakable hovering upon us, humankind. I never get tired, actually, to go back to those regions. We can call them universals. I like personally to call them deep-rooted obsessions. So here are like some of them, and let's see. This is titled Man, and with man I mean mankind. So men are no trees, a foot is no root, branches and arms wave to different swarms. Men are no suns. Well, they can be at times, but just in the glow, some of them ooze in works of art or certain looks like Mozart and Louis Brooks. Men are dinghies and kites, cruising seas and skies, tiny insects on some blue skin, striving for a dot to rest. And when they find it, up on air or down to earth, looking for the next. And this is about love. Sorry? Okay, I was hearing somebody. Time as a novel. The instant an egg crashes its head on the merciless edge of your frying pan, and there your breakfast is smiling back, or the gore second before a bubble walks into its death, wearing pink and teal, are paragraphs you can steal from the Times novel to describe what love makes you feel. A stain. And this is, I mentioned before, like an omen or a bad feeling hovering. On your way home after a day of scorn, missed chances or simple jokes, you overlook the barefoot, the dope eye of a human being, duping her demons in a red alto. On the pillowcase, framing your head in your night over, a stain is getting closer. Love, absolutely. You are the lighthouse, the lost call, the abracadabra with its wall, water that kisses a parched mouth, the flower of life blossoming out, the golden line my tongue cannot etch, an Amazon, her bold stretch, the rust on the wagon moving forward into lands of iron, light which breeds the night and the day delivered with no fight. The blue butterfly. This is part of a long poem, like 5 sections are in it. I'm reading the 4th. The poem is titled Love Trip in New York City, and the section is The Blue Butterfly. I used to speak in scribbles before sending the pilgrim adventurers of my fingertips to collect the artworks crafted by your looks. The circles you walk around, the syllables fled from the economics of discussions, the red fish of ideas and occasions slipped away from your hold. I will be the land, storing your shads, sipping in your drops, and the blue butterfly that from there will arise will be the proof of the sky flickering in our tremulous being. And the hole in the universe. The prodigy we were in the middle of the night. Our glow was visible from Sinatra Drive up to Hamilton Heights. The brightness that shined when an intuition flashed through your mind. The fluorescent words I squeezed from language to mimic the effect on my little notepad. Then one day, a line cracked on a baby cheek. A boat on the lake amid Central Park, coveted wreckage, and the 2027 bridges stapling land to water on the nation of the natives, pulled like stitches on a fresh lame finger. As big as New York is, from Wakefield down to Bay Ridge, it was not enough to hold and encompass the glorious apocalypse of us without us. It will take ages for people to realize the rayless sun they see in full moon nights is the whole love etched to escape the universe.
If I can interrupt.
So, yes?
Yes, there are also questions in the chat.
Yeah, I cannot see them, but ask, please, absolutely.
Yes, I don't know how long you were thinking of. So if you have, if you are almost at the end, we can ask the questions at the end of your presentation.
Yeah, now I'm done with the collection and with the English poetry, but I think it would be interesting because I'm also a poet in Italian. So it would be interesting maybe to see my Italian poetry, and if I translate my Italian poetry, what happens? But first I can absolutely reply to questions. So it's a perfect
I think it's better to also to see your Italian poetry and then to keep all the questions at the end, just to.
Yes, because people often ask me why I write poetry in two languages. And I answer feeling very guilty about this, that in this way I bypass translation. And I feel guilty because I am a translator myself, But when poetry is on the table, I leave translation in the bag, as I say. So I start from the language, from a word actually. And it would be, I think it is even more primeval than a word. It's sound, basically. So if a word or a sound belongs to Italian, the poem that will ensue will be in Italian. And if a word or a sound belongs to English, the poem that will ensue will be in English. So it is as easy as that, So I would have never written my English poems in Italian and vice versa. I would have never written my Italian poetry in English. And once I was invited to lecture to a college class of Italian students in a literary translation course. And as an experiment, as an exercise, I translated some poems in English of mine into Italian and some Italian poems of mine into English to show how epic the fail was and how disappointed I was. So we can maybe have a look at a couple of them and you will see by yourself, how miserable this can be. So I will read it in Italian, okay? And this is a poem that I'm really, I'm fond of this poem, and it is part of Lucciole in palmo alla notte, the first collection in Italian that I have, and it's titled Il pettirosso. Guardo attraverso il vetro delle ali di una mosca. Ringrazio la penna verde che traccia piccole mappe sulle foglie dei pioppi. Ascolto una ciglia annaspare nel mare di uno sguardo. L'arsenico in grammi cui l'invidia ricorre per oscurare la fiamma dell'umano sentire. Dentro puoi essere manicomi deserti, cantieri non finiti, spiagge piene di nulla o fucili senza la caccia. Ma alle 2:38 un pettirosso corteggia 2 tetti e un terrazzo. È il modo che ha il cielo di sanguinare bellezza. So there is a rhythm in this poem that, you know, is not in the English translation. And of course, this translation is not something artistic, you know, it's something, let's say, to convey the meaning, okay? So maybe if I put some more effort and thought into it, something better would come out. But for the time being, for me, it's not satisfactory enough. And if I show you something else, like, let me find it here. So these 2 poems belong to a new collection that I have, which is forthcoming in the fall. It's titled La Rossa Goletta, the Red Schooner. And yeah, you can have a look at the English and you can listen to the Italian. Alieno. Una mosca rossa molesta il soffitto. A terra una caravella si atteggia a stivaletto. Sgranano gli occhi le idee alla tapparella. Se non tremo, tutto è alieno. I cannot even look at the English, you know, because the Italian, the music goes in a way that the English doesn't. So yeah, this is also true for the next one. Tutte in una. Even the title, you know, I had to add women, because otherwise you don't get the female plural of tutte. Tutte in una. Un impasto di aria e pollini, di acque sorgive, robusti neuroni, notturni lustrini. Quella ragazza, dalla forma bambina, in braccio alla madre, ha dentro una donna che accenderà un lume, una lingua di buio per alcune persone, per altre epos vero, con buona pace di Omero. Quella ragazza, che sarai tu, che era mia nonna ed è nostro fratello, non attende i piani di Dio, ha una pistola per cervello. So for me, the music is really vital in poetry and in a poem, because as I mentioned before, I start there. So when you translate a poem, you have so many elements in your hands that, you know, you cannot convey them all. You are forced most of the time to let something slip. And in these poems, you know, it's music for me. In English, they don't work. And if I would read the English, so here, let me see. I read these 2 poems to you before. Spring Now is the first that I read. And, you know, at some point I read Time as a Novel, and it's the same, you know. So the Italian translation totally, you know, is disappointing for me, especially Spring Now. You know, in Italian, it sounds orribile, I would say, uno strazio, terrible. So this, for me, this is a good exercise, though. It's an exercise that proves that, for me at least, the sparkle of a poem starts with a sound most of the time, okay? Other times, As I said before, it could be something that I spot around, but most of the time is the sound or a word, as I say. So I'm in for questions now. So let me interrupt here. Yes. So I don't see the questions. Yes, probably.
Sorry, I have to unmute myself, and thank
Yeah,
you,
it's okay.
Sara. I will read the questions to you, and really thank you for just providing a glimpse into your creative process. And I think there are so many questions also related to that. The first one is from Renato. What motivated you to begin writing poetry? Did you become a poet as a result of your translation work, or did you write poetry before that? Wrestling with words,
yes.
I just finished. Wrestling
Yes.
with words as building blocks of artistic expression isn't for everyone, I suspect. What does poetry give you?
Okay, thank you for the question. I started writing poetry when I was 17. So it was before the translation and translation. And I started as, you know, as a teenager, starts writing a poetry. When you start and you are so young, it's what you get is almost confessional poetry. So you write about yourself, basically. But very soon, I noticed that really what I was intrigued by was, and I remember, and I still do this, I kept lists of words that stroke me. And I kept working around words. And this is also what I do now. So really, I have my bags full of like notes and, or even in the mobile, I pick words. And then from that word, I work around them and kind of come out with the poem. It's an exercise of patience, I would say. It's really a labor of love, and also it's meticulous. You know, you can have that initial spark, but it's just a spark. Then it's sweat. You have to sweat on the page to recreate, to create a music. For me, every poem has its own music, and I know about it when it's finished, right? Okay. So what was the second part of the question that I forgot?
What does poetry give you?
Ah, yes. Oh, an incredible amount of pleasure. I mean, I do it because of the pleasure it gives me. And it is really connected to language. Okay. Of course, Italian is my mother tongue. So I am, it's my mother. So it's domestic in a way. And I love her. I love the language with this sort of mother-daughter feeling. Whereas with English, it's a different relationship. With English, it's my candy language, I say it. I love to feel English in my mouth. So pleasure is involved in the process. And I would say that English is the crush that you never stop dating or wanting to date. I'm always, since it's not my mother tongue, it's always new to me. It's a new discovery for me, and it requires, I would say, humbleness, but also recklessness. Because you are not in your own territory. It's something different. And I love feeling that. I love that thrill. So I would say that poetry gives me pleasure, a pleasure that fiction gives me, but in a very, very small amount. So I really need to write poetry to make up for the lack of pleasure, even if I try to, bring poetry in my fiction as well as much as I can, so that I don't feel that nostalgic. So I hope I answered.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sara. And then there is Maria, who says, your poetry is so visual and compassionate. Was there a certain experience that happened that turned your sight from the skyscrapers to the ground, to the horizontal?
Oh, that's a good question. When you arrive in this city, as I said, I was immediately, the enthusiastic, I would say tourist in a way, but something was missing in me. I find it so superficial in a way. So it was soon. This shifting happened very, very soon. And there was no specific trigger in that. I didn't kind of witness something or something specific. It is really just the city that gives you so many options there of misery and also sadness, and people that I cannot really stop looking at and question and wonder what it's beyond that sad smile or those sad eyes. So I think it's really the city, and also you as a person. I think I have always been very curious in my life. And, if you're a curious animal and you happen to land in New York City, you find yourself, in your own environment, because there is so much to be curious about. So no, there was not like a specific episode in this.
Yes. And then there is Ivana. Your street photography is absolutely amazing. When you take photos of people, how do you manage not to be seeing what you're doing? Do you use your cell phone? And also, I also add another question. Do you ever ask permission, or you just steal your pictures?
I steal my picture and I use my mobile phone. And I think that, people are so into themselves. They don't even realize, that somebody else is looking at them. This is something that happens, in the subway. I don't think that it's something expressively linked to New York City. I think it's something that many big cities experiences, this sort of being in your own, dimension and not paying attention at what is happening around you. I didn't ask for permission, and I feel a little bit like a criminal in this. But yeah, I know that, many photographers do that. You take pictures passing by, and, I think that there's nothing really intrusive in those pictures. At least I try to be very considerate and not to, for instance, take pictures of small childs or, children, or from a distance or from the back. Like, for instance, the two kids playing cards, they are, from a certain distance. The exception maybe is the two brothers, the blonde brothers. I just was, creating my own narratives in my head. Like, they have the Trinity, school sort of shirt on them. So I was thinking, let's think about their upbringing. What are their parents doing? So it's me kind of then roaming away from my subjects. But yeah, this is, I actually thought about it, about, they are going to ask me if I asked for permission for the photographs. So I am a bit of a criminal here.
But you really captured the moment, the authenticity of that moment. Otherwise, it would be lost if you asked for permission.
Yeah, exactly.
Sam is also asking, have you looked at the impact of Sugar Hill gentrification?
Oh, okay. I lived in Sugar Hill for 1 year, and then I moved. Now I live in the Upper West Side, upper West Side. So let's say a little bit southern than before. Now I know, as I mentioned, well, Sugar Hill is started out as African American, then Latin American community also arrived there, but now, you know, white people live there. So it is becoming gentrified, as basically any borough in New York. This is the issue of New York City. You know, every neighborhood is becoming gentrified, starting from Brooklyn all the way up to Harlem. That is a major issue the city is facing, you know. Also because I was talking to Arianna before we started, the problem with New York now, it is incredibly expensive, and it is getting more and more expensive, especially after the pandemic. So many people are also leaving the city because it's too expensive to live. And so, you know, with this phenomenon of gentrification and the spike of prices, leaving the city is becoming tough. And yeah, so yes, this is what we are facing. Yes. But this also is affecting many big cities like London, Paris, Berlin. I know they are very expensive cities. New York is the most expensive in the world, actually.
Maria is asking, when you were translating for Dion Brand, did it feel like you were writing your own poetry and books because of the intense thought needed for rhythm?
You know, when you translate a work of art of somebody else, you're very cautious and you're very aware that what you are doing is their work. Of course, it's your language. If, you know, I'm translating it into Italian, it's a bit of my language. But I've always, you know, I always want to be very clear with myself, you know, not to trespass, you know, that is important. And I don't consider, you know, poetry in translation my own poetry. No, my poetry is the poetry that starts with me and ends with me.
And Anna is asking, Anna Lombardo, I know her, she's connecting from Italy. She's a poet herself. She's asked, you say about the pleasure you feel about writing your lines, and what do you expect your poems do to other people?
Yeah, I mean, like for me, if the other people, if the reader experiences like a tiny bit of pleasure while reading my poetry, you know, that is my dream. That is, you know, I'm the happiest woman and poet in the world, because that is the thing. And it's also, in addition to pleasure, which is of course vital in any artistic form, I think, it is also thinking. So for me, when I hang around, when I feed myself with literature and poetry, what I really look for is to think. So a poem makes me think. It cracks my mind open. That is what I look for in a work of art, you know, a movie, like a novel or poetry. So why? Because when I think, I feel alive. And feeling alive is the feeling, if you ask me, that I always want to feel more than any feeling. Because if you think about love, of course, it's nice to feel love. But love then has different degrees. You know what I'm talking about. So it changes, you know, it's volatile. Feeling alive, you know, that hubris, that enthusiasm, that elan towards life, that is absolutely stable. And I've always felt it when I approach a work of art. So pleasure, but also thought, thinking, that a reader to feel.
Thank you. And Diego Bastianutti, he's a writer and a poet himself from Vancouver, but of Italian origin. He asks, how has your experience in New York affected your Italian poetry?
That's a good question. I think my English poetry and my Italian poetry are very different. So my English poetry is more, I would say, interested into like even everyday subjects. It's visual, as somebody said. It's down to earth, more than my Italian poetry. My Italian poetry is much more on the universal side, and I still have to understand why is it so, but explore two different worlds with two different linguistic tools. So I'm happy about that, actually. And I don't think that my being in New York has affected my Italian poetry. No. It has affected my English poetry.
And Sam is asking, are there any topics that you avoid in your poetry for others?
No, I think I am the worst censor of myself. I don't censor myself because, a poet, an artist, a writer, they have to feel free, and so even if I can, I don't know, tackle thorny issues, I'll do it because I have to do it.
And there is this last question.
So I try to stay away from, yes?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to finish. So I try to stay away from the fear of, saying something or, dealing with something too hot. Of course, I'm very aware of the power that I have in my hands as a writer. So I am very careful. This does not mean that I shut myself up. I'm careful.
And yes, there is one last question, and then we are at almost at the end of our event. By Diego again, are there realities in the English world that find no correspondence at all in the Italian reality?
Reality, what you mean by reality? If maybe she or he can.
Diego, perhaps if you would like to unmute yourself and
yes, I would like maybe know a little bit better of the question.
For example,
because reality is general, right? So
something that you have lived, let's say, in the English world, in New York, that you write about, but that you can find no correspondence with any experience that you've had in the Italian world, in Italy. And therefore you find no, the vocabulary is missing in your Italian.
Well, that's a good question. Let's say that when I feel that the vocabulary is not there, I don't write about it,
So you don't translate.
Because everything starts from the vocabulary. Yeah, the translation, you mean? Yeah, oh my God, yes. When I translate, for instance, Dion Brand, okay, she has like poetry, which is written partly in Pidgin English. We don't have such thing as a Pidgin Italian. We have dialects, but it's something completely different. So it was really tough for me to come up with a strategy to basically handle the use she was doing of the pidgin English, because she was born in Grenada in the Caribbean, and she moved to Canada. So she uses in some, also novels, but especially in poetry, this Caribbean pidgin. So I tried to find a standard Italian, and I tried to color the Italian in a way that could do justice to her use of pidgin without sounding fake or dialect like. It would be really making a disservice to her work. So that was very tough for me. Yes, the use of pidgin. Good question.
The reason I mentioned this question is because I do translation of my own poetry. And the last book was dealing with homeless and drug addicts in the Vancouver area.
Right.
And that language I know because I have lived among those people. I have picked it up living here. But I did not have such an experience in Italy. Therefore, the vocabulary was missing, and I had to go and search for it in very dark spaces in the online in order to find the language that these people use to express their emotions.
I totally relate, because as a translator, when you face a text, sometimes you have this sort of micro languages that you need to delve into, like you did, and I did myself. You look around in dark websites or wherever to be informed and to try to find a way first to understand, and then to find an equivalent that could be satisfying. So maybe in the audience there is Franca Cavagnoli, who translated Naked Lunch by Burroughs into Italian. And it was really, a tough job, and she did an amazing job, but it took time, because there is this, drug-related world, of like vocabulary that you have to go and find like a similar experience, linguistic experience in Italian. So yeah, this is something that we go through as translators.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you everyone for being here with us, and let's have Renato Zane, our president, wrap up this event and just say some final comments.
Thank you, Arianna, and thank you very much, Sara. That was very informative for me. As someone who doesn't read a lot of poetry and finds it work, I find you very refreshing, very refreshing. I liked how even when you speak, you sound poetic. As you said, sometimes poems shimmer into being, and you have this lightness of being yourself, but then you talk about poetry not being ethereal, but really being of the earth, covered in dirt, I think you said, which is really interesting. So I learned a lot. I think my personal favorite was subway semantics,
right,
and Nefertiti, of course. So thank you so much for enlightening us, for helping us to be exposed to a different aspect of artistic expression. It's good for us those of us who don't write very much, to be able to understand this world a little bit better and appreciate your love of words. I just wanted to thank Arianna for organizing this event. And we, as an organization, we now turn our sights towards next month. As you know, we do a monthly event. And next month, we're very excited to be able to host Carlo Fierens, who is a musician, to Vancouver for a special recital concert at the UBC, the University of British Columbia Chan Center. So Arianna, in collaboration with the Istituto Italiano di Cultura di Toronto, has found a way to invite Carlo Fierens for an in-person performance. So we invite all of you to sign up for that. If you're in Vancouver or if you're in Seattle like Maria, please feel free to come up. We'd love to see you. That's April the 6th at 6:30 p.m. at the Chan Center. You can find all the information on the Dante Society BC website. And in addition, as usual, I always mention the language school. So if anyone is interested in signing up for a language course for the spring, the courses start on April the 10th, and there's always a discount for members. So if you're not a member of the society, please consider joining and becoming a member. I see Tom, our secretary, is online as well. Hi, Tom. Tom handles all of the memberships, and he would love to receive a membership from one of you. So thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet you in person through Zoom, of course.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you, Sara, for these wonderful glimpses of New York City and of the creative life of an artistic poet. Really appreciate your time. And that's it for me. Arianna, back to you. Thank you all.
Thank you. Yes, I just have to say thank you all. And there is a link in the chat if you want to register for the event in April for our in-person event. And so thank you, Sara, again. And see you next.
I just want to thank the people who wrote beautiful things in the chat that I managed to read them now. So thank you, guys. I really, really appreciate it. And honestly, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Renato. And thank you, Arianna, for inviting. Thank you.
Bye to everyone and enjoy the sun.
Yes.